Good evening, everyone. I'll begin the meeting by acknowledging the continuing connection of Aboriginal people to country, culture and community, including traditional custodians of this land, the Wadundji and Kaniang people of the Noongar Nation, paying respects to elders, past and present. We'll declare the meeting open at 5:30 p.m. The meeting's being live streamed and recorded in accordance with Council Policy EMCP2. Members of the public are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed without the permission of the chairperson. Whilst every endeavour has been made to only record those who are actively participating in the meeting, loud comments or noises may be picked up on the recording. So I welcome everyone in the gallery and those participating through the live stream. Just to note that agenda briefings are open to the public to attend and observe. However, any questions, deputations or petitions will be presented to the Ordinary Council meeting. There'll be no debate-style discussion, as this needs to take place in the ordinary meeting of Council when the issue is set for decision. So in attendance tonight, there is myself, then Councillor Alexis Davey, Councillor Peter Gubler, Councillor Anita Lindeman, Councillor Grant Patrick, and that's all we have. Okay, to my right we have Morris Batalana, Acting Director Finance and Corporate, Ross Marshall, Director of Operations, and to my left we have CEO Temporaries Tim Clinch, Manager Corporate Services Lauren Clifford, and Administration Officer Corporate Services Samantha Farquhar. And we welcome guests in the public gallery and also our live stream viewers. At item 2.1 we have apologies from Councillor Glover, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Bailey. And Councillor Shand. There are no approved leaves of absence. Are there any applications for leave? At item 3, there are no announcements. And item 4, declarations of interest. Division 6, Subdivision 1 of the Local Government Act 1995 states that care should be taken by all councillors to ensure that a financial impartiality interest is declared and that they refrain from voting on any matter which is considered to come within the ambit of the Act. Are there any declarations of interest for this evening?
Yes, just an indirect one to item 9.1.2.
That is...
Wild camp.
Oh, thank you.
Rather, I'm not... It's only just related to Lingalonga, so I'm not sure whether...
Thank you, Councillor Gubler. Do we need a form? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And Councillor Patrick.
And Councillor Patrick?
Yeah, thank you. Just an impartiality interest. It's very loose, but I thought, for transparency's sake, item number 9.2.6, the Windy Arbour Proprietary Limited. Member of my household previously worked for one of the applicants listed, so I thought I would just declare that so that it's out there for the public.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Patrick doesn't need a form, does he? Yes. He's got it too? Okay.
Well done.
Okay, so there's no public question time tonight, so we'll move on through presentations at item 6, deputations and delegates' reports. Moving on to item 7. Do councillors have any questions regarding the ordinary council meeting minutes of the 28th of August? And reports from committees, are there any questions? We've got several there. No questions? So moving on to item 9, Director of Operations. Item 9.1.1, the request for consent to mine for reserves 2052 and reserve 22860. Director of Operations, would you like to speak to this report?
Thank you, Madam President, if I may. The request to consent for mine is certainly an item that the administration does not manage very often, if at all. I couldn't actually find any records that we've processed such a request like this previously. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider a consent to mine request by Cooler Gold Limited and respond to the Minister for Mines and Petroleum. As we know, mining resources are the property of the state. Exploration and development of these resources is decided by the state in accordance with the Mining Act 1978. Please note that the Minister has already granted a licence with a no mining condition on Reserve 2052. The Shire currently has a management order on Quarry Reserve 22860, and that's for sand. Cooler Gold Limited has requested the consent of the Minister for Mines and Petroleum to carry out mining on reserves 2052 and 22860. The prefix of the E on the tenement suggests that it is for exploration. The Mining Act defines mining, which I found interesting, as fossicking, prospecting, exploration and mining operations, so it's pretty broad. In accordance with the Mining Act 1978, the Department of Mines, Industry, Regulation and Safety has referred Cooler Gold's request for consent to carry out mining to the Shire of Donnybrook Balingup for comments and recommendation. Although the Shire of Donnybrook Balingup's local planning scheme and local laws cannot prohibit or affect the granting of a mining tenement or carrying out of any mining operations authorised by the Mining Act, consideration of the request received allows the Shire the opportunities to support the proposal subject to conditions. Please note that this is not a development application and that Council is in effect a referral agency in this instance. By recommending the proposal, Council may request conditions to be imposed upon the approval by the Minister. To assist in this report, Conditions 1 to 11 are recommended by the Executive, and condition 12 is recommended by Deemers. Although the Shire has no existing licence on Reserve 2052, we are aware of the significance of the Sandhills Walk Trails. Condition 1 addresses this concern. The Shire has an active management order over Reserve 22860 and seeks to maintain ownership of the sand quarry. Condition 6 addresses this concern. We understand that this request has no effect on the Shire's nearby sand quarrying operations. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Lindemann?
Yeah, thanks. Just through the chair, to start with, is this the first that any surrounding neighbours or people in that vicinity would have heard about this?
Thank you. Councillor Lindemann, Director of Operations?
Thank you, Madam President. My understanding is the licence has, in fact, it's actually stated in the letter from Deemers, has already been granted. So that in that process, that's when the consultation would have been with the neighbours. So that was back in 2021.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Any further questions? Councillor Patrick?
Thank you. A couple of questions, if I may. Obviously, do we have a scope of works as to what this actually is referring to? Because we're talking exploration, and I appreciate the definition that you've given us, Roscoe, that mining does cover exploration. But what this doesn't give us is any indication as to what Coolangatta are looking at doing as their mining activities. It doesn't determine whether or not they're planning on establishing a huge open pit, or whether or not they're looking to scuffle around on the surface to see if there's any resources there, or just drill a few, test bores or holes for core samples. Do we have any indication or access to any documentation that might give an indication as to what the scope of works actually are that they're proposing in these areas?
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Director of Operations?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councillor Patrick. On face value, no. What I will do is take the question on notice, if that's okay, and we'll seek some information from Deemers for the scope of works.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
When you go back to Deemers, could you please ask that the attachments that they've included, the maps, that the legends are included in those maps, because they've been cut off when they were supplied? And just the report talks about both 2052 and 2025, which I'm assuming is a typo, but it'd be great just to make sure that it's not. And can I ask whether the Shire's previously held licence under Section 91, whether that was allowed to expire intentionally or unintentionally?
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Director of Operations?
Thank you, Madam President. Councillor Davey, I can't answer that question. I'm unaware if it was intentional or a lapse, a simple lapse. So thank you. We'll take that one on notice if that's okay.
Councillor Davey?
So given that the extractive industry is not a permitted use in the general industry zone and we're operating within the town site, did the officers actually support the proposal, or was it only supported on the basis that they would then be able to suggest conditions?
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Did you catch that? Yeah. Director of Operations?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Very good question. I asked that question myself, actually, of the staff. And it's quite interesting that you're right, it's an ex-use, so not permitted. However, there is an intricacy where mining is actually possible, providing the mining is carried out prior to the development of the land. So, i.e. take the minerals out and then develop the land. So depending on the timing, it is actually permissible.
Can I just ask you to repeat that question, because I didn't catch it?
Yeah, so my question was that given that extractive industry is not a permitted use in the general industry zone and we are operating within the town site, I was asking whether the officers who wrote the report actually supported the proposal, or they were just supporting it on the basis that then they could suggest conditions to have some control over the development.
Thank you.
As of
Thank you. And you had another question? Or, sorry, Councillor
No,
Lindemann?
yeah, continue. Follows on.
Yeah, if I could.
Director of Operations.
Through the chair, it is a light industrial area. So it is, so the development investigation area is for light industrial. And so that's what I was talking about before with the X-use. As far as the conditions that we've put on it, they are recommendations, just understanding that we would support the application and for no other reason. We have not looked at the alternative, which is to reject the application, because we did consider that and we thought that would be probably a higher risk financially to the organisation, and hence this proposal we consider to be takes away the financial risk, and that's why you won't see it in the risk register.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
What do you consider the financial risk from rejecting the application?
Thank you, Madam President. I don't know. The risk would be probably legal costs, in the sense that we would have to go and seek legal advice, because this is a bit out of our wheelhouse. The cost of that advice, sitting here, I'd have to take that question on notice. I'm not sure what that would cost us, but it'd be simply what sort of outsourcing we would have to do to provide council with some confidence.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lindemann.
This has been discussed before, but I just want it on record. I asked about the native title of that area, and that that has been changed over to native title in some of those areas mapped out. Is that the facts?
Director of Operations.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councillor Lindemann. Part of the consultation process is that the proponents actually have to consult in accordance with Aboriginal cultural heritage. There's some detail actually in the licence conditions which support that as well. So the onus is on the applicant to do that, so yes, they have to. There are some culturally significant areas in that vicinity that we're aware of. Recently we reviewed an application for some of the land transactions to actually pass back some of that land, which is fairly adjacent.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I got sidetracked before when I repeated the question, but I had a follow-up question. You said that for extractive industry, where it's an X-use in the general industry zone, that sand extraction is supported under DAA 10 prior to industrial development, but that's not open pit mining, yeah, that's slightly different.
Director of Operations.
To be honest, I'm not really sure if I understand that question.
Sorry, I'll reword it.
Yeah.
So on page 19 of 55.
Yeah, the table.
In the table, yeah, on the right-hand side, it says, in the first line, it says extractive industry is X-use in the general industry zone, notwithstanding this under DAA 10, sand extraction is supported prior to industrial development.
Yeah.
In your response earlier, you alluded to mining in general being a permissible use prior to sand extraction.
Yeah.
So prior to industrial development.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, I'd consider it to be one and the same. Probably to help, the only, I guess, minerals that we see of any value, when I say we, I mean the administration in that area, is sand, so maybe that's why we've put that in there. And certainly we see it as a valuable resource for public works.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Councillor Lindemann.
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair. It talks about vegetation rehabilitation, etc. Now, I am quite familiar with that area. Walk trails are one of my favourites in that area. Lots of people use it. There's natives there, native flora that's indicative to the area, i.e. you've got spider orchids, donkey orchids, fairy orchids. You've got all of those on that trail, very close to the road where all the sand is. How do they propose to rehabilitate those orchids? How would they put that into the conditions to replace them? Because I don't believe you can do it.
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann.
Thank you, Madam President.
Director of Operations.
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann. The tenement which is known as E70/5599 has conditions of extraction. One of the conditions, which is actually item 3, is the licensee's attention is drawn to the Environmental Protection Act 1986 and the Environmental Protection in brackets Clearing of Native Vegetation Regulations 2004, which provides for the protection of all native vegetation from damage unless prior permission is obtained. So reading this condition, obviously it is upon the applicant to make sure that they follow those two acts. One could assume that part of that process would be to address your concern.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Director of Operations.
Thank you.
Councillor Lindemann.
Thank you through the chair. Further to that, however, seasonally they would not be identified. So I see that as
A risk.
how would they identify? It would need to happen now to identify what's there to be able to restore it. So that would be my question, is how would they do that?
Thank you. Director of Operations, would you like to take that on notice? Or-
I definitely would, Madam President. Thank you for that. So the question I'll take on notice is basically, given that it's a point in time that the survey might be, for want of a better word, survey might be carried out, how do they identify species that may not be prevalent at that point in time? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Councillor Davey.
This was briefly discussed earlier, but where you are unsure what the cost implications or what the process would be to find out what not granting consent, the fallout of that could be on the Shire administration, how long would it take you to find out?
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann. Director of Operations.
Thank you, Madam President. I would estimate longer than a week, so that would require more time than the OCM for next week. I know when in the past when we've sort of sought legal advice, we have received it fairly promptly, but so I'd assume a couple of weeks, but I think we'd need at least a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Can I ask the question, please, Director of Operations? Is there any negative impact from deferring the motion for another OCM or SCM?
Madam President, not that I'm aware of, no.
There's no date that we're up against at the moment.
There's no, on face value, you've seen the letters that have come from DeMuse. There's no cut-off date. There doesn't seem to be any penalty. So on face value, I don't see that there's any repercussions of that kind.
That's good to know. Any other questions? Councillor Davey.
Could we please get some clarity on whether there is a deadline and whether we would miss the window to either consent or not consent if we were to defer this item? Could we get that clarity before next week, please?
Madam President, if I may, yeah, certainly I can call DeMuse tomorrow and ask that question. I'm not guaranteeing I'll get an answer, but I will certainly call them and try and find out.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Lindemann.
I guess the question does follow on, yes, the deferring ecological, environmental, hydrological, not understanding the process of the mine or the mining they suggest. I feel that we need to know what that is and what it looks like and what effects it has to be able to then offer some advice on where we sit. So I think that the question would be, yes, I would need far more information than that is relevant here at the moment. And if we could get that sort of information, would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we?
Thank you, Madam President. If I may, Councillor Lindemann, obviously I will definitely seek, as per Councillor Patrick's request, a scope of works. And I'll paraphrase what it looks like, what it is. I'll try and get some information. And they'll also use the term, look, we don't know what we don't know. So I'll ask them to try and give us, some information that, any, person in the public should be able to attain by asking that question. So I'll do a question along those lines.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Given that you're writing down a list of questions, could you... Could you, you alluded to the fact that you thought that there'd been some consultation undertaken in 2021 with nearby parties. If you could just check on that, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam President, if I may, I found that interesting actually myself, because the consultation must be carried out before the tenement will be granted. And the consultation is in the sense that the applicant will send out letters to addresses of the affected parties. The letters are certified or registered, so you have to sign for them. And the applicant can actually use that as their evidence that they have carried out consultation. That has to happen before the tenement can be granted. So I will ask another person at DEMAS, but that's the answer I actually got today on that question. And that's why it was granted back in 2021. But I will try and, I guess, seek another opinion, or sorry, shouldn't say opinion, that's not the right word. But I will ask another person at DEMAS if that is actually the case.
Councillor Lindemann?
Yeah, may I ask, could we have a copy of that letter to understand exactly what was proposed in 2021 and if or does it differ from today?
Might actually put that one on to the manager for corporate, because we should have a copy of that in records, because we would have received the letter.
Manager Corporate Services, will be able to follow that one up? Okay. It might also be interesting to see if it was originally awarded to Cooler Gold and it hasn't been transferred, please.
Could I
Councillor
May I
Lindemann?
ask just further, just how, with the radius, how many properties, homes, etc., were delivered that information? Considering it's within a town site, and we
So
can have
what was
festivals
the
with
scope of
5K, then possibly we need to have something.
So what was the scope of the
This,
consultation?
is there a
And-
radius as the crow flies, or is it,
Yeah.
just, well,
So who was
how?
contacted and has that changed?
how many, how far, etc. More detail on that as well, thank you.
Because there may have been change in property owners. Is that the case?
Madam President, if I may, the answer that I actually asked that question myself today, the answer I got was if the property boundary falls within the tenement boundary, then that triggers consultation. So if you are literally on the other side of the line, then there's no requirement to consult.
Director of Operations, is there a requirement for them to monitor change in ownership of the people that live within the tenement?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Madam
Okay.
President. I have to take
Because
that one on
then
notice.
There may be more notice required. I don't know what the process is.
Yeah, I'm not
Are
sure
there
on
any
that
other
one.
questions? Are you thinking, Councillor Davey, or are you right? You sure? Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll move on. Item 9.1.2, the Wild Campout event application. Director of Operations, would you like to speak to this report?
Thank you, Madam President. Probably not. I think we've brought a number of these event applications up to Council now, so I'd be quite happy just to take some questions on notice. Or sorry, some questions.
Councillor Lindemann?
Oh no, it's probably a
Just-
broader,
Just a moment, please.
I think Councillor Dubler has a defeat of financial interests, so he probably should just quickly
Yes.
leave the meeting while this discussion occurs.
This topic is your financial interest.
Sorry.
Councillor Gubler has left the room. Councillor Lindeman, your question.
Thank you. Just on a broader scale, I think I keep coming back to the calendar of events. I do go to bi-monthly meetings with the Chamber of Commerce, and I think these sorts of things, if they were to progress and dates were set, that they did fall into some sort of calendar or there was some sort of communication between the two. Do you think that that might happen into the future to allow small business to capitalise on these sort of events?
Thank you, Councillor Lindeman. It's certainly something we might include in our events management policy. CEO Clinch, would you agree?
We are preparing an events management policy at the moment, so certainly those things can be put forward for discussion. And council needs to understand where its responsibilities and controls lie, and it's hard to. It's more about probably encouraging events to do that rather than, I don't think there's a way to require it, but certainly there's ways to try and spread economic benefit across the Shire if you can, and the policy could allude to that and provide some examples of how event organisers could maximise local benefit.
Okay. Thank you, CEO Clinch. Are there any other questions? Okay. Moving on to 9.1.3. We'll just wait for Councillor Gubler to come back in. Welcome back, Councillor Gubler. So we're on to 9.1.3, the Shire of Donnybrook-Balingup Interim Local Recovery Plan Update. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Davey?
Were we going to get a small briefing on this one, or?
We can have. Director of Operations, would you like to do that?
Thank you, Madam President. Councillor David will be a very small briefing. Part of the process following the when we update our local emergency management arrangements is we update our local recovery plan. This is really just a bit of ongoing maintenance. Things like, and you can see the amendments in the report. So it's just making sure that if we have an event that triggers recovery, that it's up to date, we can grab it and run with it. And as we've learnt many times, the people and the numbers change. So as long as we try and update this as regularly as possible, we'll get our best chance of keeping it up to date.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Any questions, councillors? Thank you. Moving on to 9.2, Director of Finance and Corporate. 9.2.1, Schedule of Accounts Paid, as at the 31st of August 2024. Any questions? Moving on to 9.2.2, Statement of Financial Activity Report, as at the 31st of July 2024, and welcoming the change in the reporting format. Would you like to speak to this report? Acting Director, Director of Finance and Corporate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Only just to reiterate the staff comment about how these are based upon draft budget figures at the time of reporting. So when this goes to council, it will still stay draft, even though you've adopted your budget tonight, because it's just a timing issue. So that's the only comment, but I'm happy to take any questions.
No questions? Moving on to 9.2.3, the nomination of WALGA 2024 Annual General Meeting voting delegates. CEO Clinch, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam President. So this item, obviously it does nominate I mean, council only has 2 councillors attending the AGM this year, so it's pretty easy to nominate those 2 delegates. But I guess a departure from previous years for this council is that I think in the past, council hasn't provided direction to delegates on how to vote on motions, and this year it's a new practice was to try and provide some guidance to the 2 delegates on how council as a whole feels about the motions that have been submitted by other local governments. So that's been provided in the recommendation, but obviously, like any debate, there can be new information that is raised that might change the delegates' view, and I guess the recommendation allows that to happen, that if the delegates feel that either the tone of debate, the content of debate, or other amendments as such come into the debate, that they don't necessarily have to follow the council mandated position, as long as they can obviously justify why they would depart from that. But I guess it's done to try and provide the 2 delegates with a certainty that they're speaking generally on behalf of the council if they choose to debate the motions.
Thank you, CEO Clinch. Do councillors have any questions? Moving on to item 9.2.4, the adoption of changes to Council Policy EM-CP5, elected members' allowances and entitlements. Do councillors have any questions? Item 9.2.5, the annual concession on split local government boundary. Do councillors have any questions? And item 9.2.6, Councillor Patrick's not required to leave the room, is he? No. Yep, okay. Just on this item, councillors, we can ask questions on this, but if you need to ask questions regarding attachment 9.2.61, draft deed of assignment of lease, or 9.2.6 bracket 3 assignees financial documents, then we will need to close the meeting to the public. So do councillors have any questions? Moving on to 9.3, we have no reports from the Chief Executive Officer. And similarly for item 10, we have no elected member motions. And item 11, there is no new business of an urgent nature. Councillor Davey?
Could I please get a bit more information on when and how you would introduce new business of an urgent nature?
Thank you, Councillor Davey. CEO Clinch?
So when and how? So generally, I mean, obviously, that would be new business raised at the council meeting. So potentially, if there was bearing in mind that any, the key word here is urgent. So any item that comes as a late item needs to have an urgent element to it. You really shouldn't be putting up stuff that can simply wait another month. But if there is business or an item that comes up in the next week that has to come to council, the staff would prepare an item of urgent business, and if it was done, and Manager of Corporate Services might correct me if I'm wrong, but if it was done a few days in advance, it would be circulated to councillors. But if it was done, say, at the very last minute, councillors may not see it until the meeting. That would be extreme, but it can happen if something urgent comes up, and the council has to accept. So council has to accept that it is urgent. So if the exec put up an item that the councillors feel is not urgent enough, the council can vote not to consider it. did you want to?
That's right.
You're right. Like, so is that answer the question? I mean, it's something you don't do commonly, because really council meets every 4 weeks. Most things can wait 4 weeks, but occasionally
Do you have an
they
example?
can't.
Would you have an example, CEO Clinch, of a time when you've had to?
Oh, it's been, it has, yeah, notwithstanding I said that you don't do it rarely, that I actually have, yeah, there's been quite a few examples. It might be a deadline. There might be a deadline set by a third party for, say, a consultation that seeking council's comment, and the closing date for comments is before the next ordinary council meeting.
Okay.
So that would be an example. So that would be one where perhaps the comment period would be quite short. That's why it didn't make it into the agenda initially, because we probably got notification after the agenda closed, and then the closing date is before the next council meeting. So that's quite a common example. Budget amendment, could be an urgent budget amendment that needs to be approved. Essentially, can't wait 4 weeks. But the key thing there is it's up to the executive to convince the council that it is urgent, and so that's provided with the report. So then council can make an informed decision.
Thank you. Can I just have a moment of your time before I move on to item 12? If councillors have no questions for this, we don't need to close, so we'll just ask if there's any questions first. Okay. For item 12, do councillors have any questions before we close? For no purpose, if there's no questions, I won't close. Councillor Patrick? Councillor Gubler? No? Well, then we don't need to close the meeting to the public. There are no public reading of resolutions at item 12.2 as a consequence, and that moves us on to closure of the meeting. And we'll declare the meeting closed at 6:09 p.m. and advise that the next ordinary council meeting will be held on Wednesday the 25th of September 2024 at 5 p.m. in the Shire of Donnybrook Balingup Council Chamber.